Hi, welcome to Africa in Perspective. My name is Nelda and I discuss African affairs Mondays through Fridays. In today's video, we're going to be reacting to an Instagram reel that I found on Magat Wade. And she's a Senegalese entrepreneur who was raised in France, which has done absolutely amazing in terms of her businesses. And she's been talking a lot about Africa's prosperity. In particular, Magat has been talking about how Africa is heavily regulated, and that has made it so hard for herself to be able to incorporate her businesses in Africa. But also she's seen that this is an experience that is shared across the African continent. So we're going to watch a video, see what she has to say, and then we're going to look at how exactly Africa as a region is being overregulated, if it is even being overregulated. I'm going to watch the video now.
Line up 100 Africans here, line up 100 non-Africans here. You ask them, why is Africa poor? Most Africans and their allies will come up with the usual suspects: colonialism, slavery, stealing our natural resources, racism, yada, 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 yada. The non-Africans who are not allies of Africans, have no compassion or whatever, would tend to say low IQ, they fight all the time, they're lazy, they're crooks. Both sides would also say bad leaders, bad government. But do you know what I don't hear from either side? No one will say Africa is the poorest region in the world today, because it is the most overregulated region in the world. It is a place in the world where it's hardest for any entrepreneurs to do business.
Now, there's several things I want to address with the video. I'll try to stay on the main focus for today, which is overregulation in Africa. But I just want to say, we cannot stop talking about colonialism and slavery. We can't. I disagree with that particular point, just because we cannot deny the realities of what happened during colonialism. As a matter of fact, I think we don't talk about it enough. And we also cannot just move past it as if it didn't happen and be like, okay, well, it happened in the past, let's just move forward. The effects of colonialism are still living on. Countries like the Sahel states, they have their own complications, they have their own weaknesses, yes. But the fights that you're still seeing with them trying to kick out the French because France has been having a very tight grip on them, all of that is still going on till to this very day. The fact that resources are being extracted out of Africa. Africa is the richest continent in resources, but we're the poorest in terms of nominal GDP. That is not a coincidence, guys. It is a very clear effect of what happened during colonialism and slavery. So we cannot take that away from ourselves. Now, with that as well, the way I usually think about it, in case anybody's still struggling with understanding where I'm coming from, think about it this way. If somebody had, let's say, an infection in their legs and they had to be amputated, you cut off the legs, sure. Years later down the line, you cannot tell that person, stop talking about your infection, stop talking about the amputation of your legs. It's already past. That person still every day has to live with a reminder of the kind of life they would have had if their legs were not amputated. In the same way, Africa has been amputated. We lost 12 million people away to slavery because they were taken to other continents to work as slaves. We're still bleeding as a continent because, again, like I said, our resources are still being extracted on the daily because the channels that were set up during colonialism are still there and our resources are still being taken away from us. The bad leaders that Magat was mentioning are partly in place because our governance systems are so broken. We're not following our traditional governance systems that at that time were working for us. Again, they have their own weaknesses, but we cannot say, oh yeah, we just need to move forward past colonialism. No, the effects are still living on. Now, speaking of the effects of colonialism, Magat goes on to say that one of the main reasons, if not the main reason, that she doesn't hear people talking about is how overregulated Africa as a continent is. And the first time I heard her say this actually was on the Jordan Peterson podcast. And I was like, is it really true? Is it really true that Africa is that overregulated? So today I'm going to be presenting a couple points just to show you just how hard it is to start a business on the African continent and why this is something that we actually need to be looking into because Magat has been speaking about it for years now. So first, we're going to start with the World Bank's Doing Business Index. So this report came out in 2020, which is the last year of its publication that I could find. And this report has this score called the Ease of Doing Business, which is self-explanatory, how easy it is to do a business in any given country. Sub-Saharan Africa scored 51.8 out of 100. Now, this is because on average, it takes roughly 7.4 procedures, 34.4 days, and it costs an equivalent of 36.3% of per capita income to start a business in any sub-Saharan African country. Let me just break it down for you. It means if you want to start a business in a sub-Saharan African country, you'll need roughly 7 procedures. That means, you need to go through 7 multiple steps, potentially speaking to 7 different agencies to be able to get this business running. You will need roughly 34 days, so that is over a month, and you'll need to spend more than a third of your income to be able to generate any wheels that are moving in that business. And the global average is 4.9 procedures, which means we can estimate it to 5, roughly 12 days, and 23.3% of your income. Do you guys see the issue here? Now, you're comparing yourselves to people in the United States. Somebody can just wake up today and be like, oh my gosh, in a week or so, I could have a business up and running. You see people on TikTok starting all these nice businesses. Way easier for them to be able to run that kind of environment. And say what you will about capitalism. I have my own qualms with capitalism as well. But you cannot deny the fact that it actually helps to have people who are Wow. English is not my first language, guys. I'm bound to mispronounce words. I'm so sorry, I'm getting defensive. But people who have this entrepreneurial mindset that they're going for it, they're going to start businesses, they're going to start ideas, they're coming up with solutions. We're actually supposed to create an environment that facilitates these people to be able to bring these solutions to society. I've always said this and I'll say it every single time. Africans, we're not less smart than other people. I know in the video again, Magat says that there are people who claim that Africans have low IQs. That is a fallacy. We're as smart as everybody else in the world, but it's the fact that we don't have a space to showcase these ideas. And one of the ways we have obstacles in our path is our own governments are putting all these regulations and all these procedures to stop us from actually starting businesses. And I don't know if they're aware that they're doing this on purpose or if it's a mistake, but there are very few things in this world that are coincidences. Anyways, when you look at another area here, African businesses are also forced to pay 36.6 tax payments a year. That is on average. When you look at the global average, that is only 23 payments. At the same time, African businesses spend around 280 hours just to comply to all the regulations that are set in space. Globally, it's 234 hours. So we're always above average. And that makes it a little bit harder for people to operate businesses. We're not even talking about the massive businesses. We're talking about just small, regular businesses that any person in the community can start if they have an idea. There was another report, this is more recent, and this is by the Heritage Foundation Economic Freedom Index from 2025. And this says Sub-Saharan Africa's average economic freedom score is 52.7, again, out of 100. And it's because we have a lot of regulations when it comes to starting, operating, and closing a business. So the average is just, again, it's above average because globally we're looking at a 62.2. I mean, we're lower. That is very unclear. The global average is 62.2, which is better than what we are scoring at 51.5. Now, one of the reasons that has happened is one, we have massive governments. So the tax burden is massive. We're being taxed a lot of money. The regulatory costs are the ones that are behind this score because the government needs to regulate businesses, but they're introducing a lot of procedures, like I was saying. They're introducing a lot of taxes. They're introducing a lot of agencies to be able to care for these businesses. You have to go through hoops to be able to start a business, or to even if you've started it, to be able to pay your taxes, to have your license. It takes a very long time. And of course, that means the business costs are going to be higher for people. So if somebody doesn't have a massive amount of money or massive amount of capital to be able to start a business, they're not going to start a business because then they're discouraged to go ahead and do something. While in certain countries, like I know Huda Beauty, you may not know this because a lot of my viewers are actually men. Huda Beauty, massive beauty brand. She started with was it £4,000 in her account, and she's built a massive business, and she was able to start that. It wasn't definitely in a sub-Saharan African country. But I keep wondering how many Africans actually have that much money in their accounts. They have the solutions to the issues they see in their society, but they're not able to start businesses because their own governments are working against them. That is just number one. But there's so many other things. I want to keep the video short, so I'm just going to skim a little bit more quickly here. When you look at intellectual property regulation, only 60% of African countries have modernized intellectual property laws. And that means when you try to work with data, with things that are data focused, like mobile technologies, it's a little bit harder because you have, again, to jump through hoops and loops. For example, in Nigeria's IP registration process, you need to go through multiple agencies. There isn't one agency where you go to, you get all your documents done, and then you're all set when it comes to data regulation. No, you have to go through multiple agencies. And I know that is the case even in Tanzania, which is my home country. Like the founder of Nala, it's a mobile money. They're a fintech company. They help you send money across Africa. Not sponsored, by the way. Nobody's sponsoring this show so far. But he was talking about how he wanted to go through multiple countries to be able to connect the United States, people in the United States diaspora, as well as people in Africa. And he was trying to send money across, and to be able to do that in certain African countries was very hard. And he actually mentioned Tanzania, saying countries like Rwanda, it was very easy to go there, set up a system with their banks. But in Tanzania, it took way longer because, again, there's so many laws, so many regulations coming through. And that is just one area. And I'm going to close with the World Bank's CPIA scores. So the World Bank's Country Policy and Institutional Assessment, that's what CPIA stands for. And the data I'm looking at is from 2023. So the average score for business regulatory environment was 2.9 in Africa. 2.9, and this is out of 6. Now, this reflects, one, overregulation through complex licensing. So there is a lot of complexity when it comes to gaining a business license or a trading license, depending on how you call it. There's a lot of labor laws that you have to abide by. And there's also inconsistency policy enforcement, which makes it a little bit harder for people. So the reason I want to speak about this last point is because of the inconsistent policy enforcement. In a lot of African countries, you can easily give a bribe and then whatever policy is in place will be lifted. I think that is something that needs to be mentioned, because if the policies that are in place are extremely complex, that opens up room for corruption. Because if I'm an entrepreneur and I want to be able to get my business up and running quickly, but I'm seeing that it's going to take me a month to start a business, the speed between the idea to the execution has already been slowed down. if I want to maneuver my way through, I'm going to find a way to maneuver through. I'm not saying I will, but I'm saying like as an entrepreneur, you're thinking about these things. So you guys see how important it is that we need to start talking about this and how overregulated our countries are. That if somebody has an idea, we need to make it as easy as possible for them to start it. And I believe there is definitely a way to be able to lower this, because if the global average for like the amount of time it will take to start a business is 11.9 days, I'm sure there is a way. There are the countries that are lower than that because it's an average. So we can definitely get that lower even in our own countries. And I don't have ideas, but I'm just saying this is something that we need to talk about. I know I've jumped around a lot in this video, so I don't know if it's very, very useful or very clear given the data that I've covered, but let me know what I'm missing. Let me know what you'd have liked for me to do different, and you will see me in the next video. Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to subscribe, to like, to share. Bye.